Thanks, Don, and thanks everybody for making time today. We're at 75 and counting, so that's a good attendance. It's going to be a wee bit slide-tastic this afternoon because we had a whole team time out yesterday exploring the priorities within the focus of and priorities of our business plan for 26-27. So I thought that would provide fodder for today. So ostensibly what I'm going to do is step through a couple of elements and aspects of that. I don't want to, it was a phrase that was used 3 times yesterday and I had missed it previously, which is drain this one. I don't know where that one came into the general management canon, but I'm going to try and move through with a reasonable amount of pace. The only other thing I was going to pick out on this header slide, which is a theme I'll come back to later on, is for those unfamiliar with it, the wee logo on the top, my top right-hand corner is our HSC Year of Data 2026. So there was some preparatory work done over the last couple of months with Lisa, Francis, Charlene and the leadership team in the Data Institute with colleagues like Declan and others in PHA. We're now substantively in that year of data, if you like, and yesterday there were a couple of call outs and events and a sort of forward planner emerging that some detail of which I'll cover later on. But we're still very much in the mode of wishing and welcoming contributions from colleagues to that in every sense. If you yourself think you could contribute to something like a lunch and learn, please reach out and Dawn will incorporate you into the program. If you think you've something under the broader banner of Year of Data where you'd like to update your colleagues on a digital dispatches in the future, again, we'd welcome having you. If next autumn and the autumn NICON occurs again, and we will have a significant digital and data presence in the NICON program. So again, if colleagues under the theme of Year of Data think there's something that they're doing that their colleagues nationally, internationally would benefit from being made aware of, then again, please put your hand up. And actually that offer goes outside the scope of the Year of Data. And if there's anything you hear in relation to our priority areas over the next 20 or so minutes, then again, either if you want more detail or more particularly if you want to be a contributor to any of the continuing education activities that we'd want, that we roll out over the course of the year, please come forward. It's not difficult to get content for digital dispatches every time, but you certainly don't want me droning on in these. We want to hear from colleagues who are delivering excellent stuff. So Don and I have rehearsed my Chris Whitty impersonation today. So next slide, please, Don. And again, I think that one's just a header slide again, but pretty much. So one of the areas I thought I would focus on the first instance for colleagues who may be less familiar because it's sort of moving at some pace is the work around the neighbourhood model. Again, colleagues will recall the Health and Social Care Reset Plan last July, and where digital and data are filtered through that in many ways. One of the big policy pushes that was outlined in broad terms in that document, but where more and more of the flesh has been put on the bones over the intervening period, has been the role of neighbourhoods in the way in which you organise and deliver health and care in Northern Ireland going forward. So for those who haven't sort of seen it and had a look at in some detail, I'm not going to go page by page on the Vision for Neighbourhood Health and Wellbeing document, but I'd encourage you all to have a look at it. There was a very well attended workshop earlier on this week at Knockbracken, and ostensibly we're in the stage now where we're at mobilization. So this isn't a series of pilots. This isn't the drip of the engagement of colleagues across the province progressively. This is a version of a big bang, and then a series of development plans and programs over the course of the coming months to put more detail behind the ambition to ensure that the central tenets are observed, but also that an element of localism and reflection of where people are and what their neighbourhood's priorities are captured and carried through. So again, without reading this word for word, fundamentally, where the neighbourhood model comes from, or what the pillars of the neighbourhood model are around care outside of hospitals. So all of those resources that we have around formal statutory services, primary care, social care, community services, and then critically partnerships with voluntary community sector and councils, as well as incorporating the insight, knowledge, and expectations of people with lived experience. The first area of work is likely to be around supporting older people on the basis of the level of resource that is directed towards older people, and practically today the amount of that resource is about their relationship with secondary care. Well, again, you'll have heard phrases like left shift, care outside of hospital, moving care closer to home, as the second bullet point suggests. So a lot of this is about understanding that it's not that hospitals have, we don't want to continue to support our hospitals and to excel. It's that we equally want to see more of an orientation towards looking after people where the need or necessity for a hospital admission perhaps is reduced or eliminated altogether. Big chunk under number 3 of innovation and the better use of information in this context. So again, under Claire Bushner's leadership and the team, we're scoping what that exactly will mean and look like. It's a no pun intended, it's a near neighbor of primary care in this regard, and therefore what does modern digital primary care look like is also a conversation that we're beginning in earnest this year in parallel with the renegotiation of the GP contract. But if you carry an image in your head of Matryoshka or Russian dolls, perhaps primary care is one of those dolls inside another doll of MDTs and community pharmacy and other resources, and then a larger doll, which is indeed the neighbourhood. And then again, that last element about those stronger community connections, the extent to which a lot of what the health service does and people's health and well-being are interrelated, but health and well-being is a much broader and bigger concept. I've stuck figuratively 2 keys. They're probably from a very expensive wardrobe or dresser. I just picked them off the internet, put a big red circle around them, because one of the phrases you might start hearing more and more this year is skeleton keys. We're looking at the possibility and potential for a number of innovations and developments around digital and data to ostensibly unlock a lot of policy objectives simultaneously. So if I think about the criticality of a directory of services for the whole of the province that is accurate, timely, comprehensive, you can see how that would make a difference to general practice, make a difference to pharmacies, make a difference to the wider neighbourhood model, and so on and so forth. I had a conversation with some colleagues in the Department of Communities earlier on this week, where again, we could see the resonance of us working in collaboration on something like that to meet their policy objectives, because often it's the same population, it's the same group of people we're all trying to support and wrap care around or empower and ensure that they are able to press on and look after themselves and work effectively in their own communities. So directory of service will feature as a skeleton key. We're talking about identity, where there was a huge amount of work done rapidly over the pandemic to make sure that we understood who was whom in relation to the vaccination programme, but that needs reviewed and updated because necessarily working at pace, there were perhaps some gaps in the way that was undertaken. We're keen on understanding whether we should prioritise a single front door for Northern Ireland. Many of the other jurisdictions in these isles have an app to rule them all. We don't currently have that. We have MyCare within Encompass, and we will want to push both the functionality within that and the spread and uptake and use of that. But people might also want a relationship with their health that isn't connected to secondary care and service delivery at all, but will want to have access to trusted and curated information. So there's a range of things that I'm just sort of planting that skeleton key phrase in your head, because as digital dispatches and other briefings and communications roll out over the year, you'll hear us say year of data quite a lot, and you'll hear us say digital skeleton keys quite a lot. And yeah, they will be flags for focus and work in the year ahead. Next slide, Dawn. So these slides, I think, can happen in rapid succession. One of the areas that I personally probably have had an amount of focus on, that the team have had less direct focus on in the last period is that element of the reset plan that talks about health, wealth and innovation and how we leverage the capability and capacity in our universities. Next slide, Dawn. How we twin that with the capacity that we've got for innovation in the province. Again, this isn't an exclusive list of partners in that regard, but colleagues will be familiar with the job that Harani have done over the last 4 or 5 years. They'll be familiar with MOIC. I'm desperately keen that we tap into and use as much of our quality improvement and continuous improvement skills as practically possible in this space, but also that there's something about the way in which our relationship with our communities can be articulated when it comes to innovation that, again, is a bit of a USP for Northern Ireland. And then next slide. And then the third element of this is how, when we develop innovations, do we make them sticky? Do we make those the way in which care is organised and provided in Northern Ireland? Because there can often be a bit of a profit in your own land scenario here, where it's easier for people to sell their wares overseas than it is for them to be, for an uptake within the health and social care system in Northern Ireland. Getting those three things right, getting the relationship with those three things streamlined, getting it more intermeshed with one another, getting it clearer about our priorities for all of that effort and energy is one of the challenges that's being set. There'll be a partnership, or is a partnership, emerging between Department of Economy and Department of Health, and then supporting probably the development of a new entity, analogous to things like health innovation networks that exist across the water. But I just wanted to highlight that work is going on in a collaborative way with all of the stakeholders, and many more have been highlighted here. Anybody who saw the press associated with the Health Tech Spring event last Thursday and Friday will have seen that there's a strategic partnership with AstraZeneca that was announced through the course of that. There are many more opportunities because of our size and scale, and because the richness of our digital and data assets for Northern Ireland to be on the front foot in this regard, and that's one of those ambitions that the 26-27 business plan will focus on. Next slide, Dawn, and then again, next again, I think we'll just skip through these two if that's all right. Let's go. So in terms of the focus of the business plan, and like any business plan, you're trying to take a incredibly complex range of things and distill them down to a number of priority areas. Neighbourhood and community care I've probably talked about expansively when I've talked about the neighbourhood model. Value from digital investment, we have spent an awful lot of money over the last couple of years to get us to where we are now, which is in relative terms in a very mature place. We have taken, and colleagues rightly have taken, plaudits for deploying at scale programs like Encompass. We are in a very tough financial environment currently, and consequently what we should be looking at is ensuring that all of the benefits that were highlighted, and many more that have emerged since Encompass or similar programs at scale have been deployed in the province, are we getting the best out of these assets? Are we delivering the productivity gains that were highlighted or anticipated in relation to that investment to begin with? So quite a lot of focus this year on driving value out of the digital investment that's been made over the last couple of years. Under the third one around trusted data foundations, again, fundamentally in relation to that year of data, there is an opportunity. You can't build this on sand. We have to be able to build this on consistency. We have to be able to build this on trust. We have to be able to build this on lots of ways in which the aspects of richness of the data that we've got comes together in a way more effectively. So that's where the Trusted Data Foundations focus will be this year. Secure and scalable digital foundations. Again, you can sort of does anybody read a newspaper anymore? Turn the pages of a newspaper. You can flick through the BBC website on an almost daily basis currently, and probably exacerbated by what's going on in the Middle East. Cyber attacks of various scales and natures are happening far too often for our comfort. So one of the areas that we need to again revisit and understand under the Once for Northern Ireland banner is how are we at our core, and how robust and resilient are our digital foundations? What do we understand about our architecture and how everything today meshes together? And also, as we think about investments to the future, how do we make sure that they augment and complement what we've currently got, rather than be standalone or isolated or indeed fundamentally built in a completely different way than what we're currently doing? And then the last one, again, to a certain extent, the conversation around the role of universities and innovation and is one aspect of this. But where do we get into partnership relationships to both increase our core capability and to draw in from the strengths and insights of other partners, whether they be university partners, whether they be supplier partners, and what are our strategic relationships with, how do we leverage what are we have a very small number of very important strategic commercial relationships in the province. How do we leverage those going forward in a way that benefits those partners, but also benefits us fundamentally? So that's a sort of framing narrative for where the business plan is sort of what it's attending to in the coming year. I'll go into a little bit of detail on the next sort of half a dozen slides, but again, I'm not going to spend a long time on these. I think there are individual members of the senior leadership team responsible for those areas. If we get any questions, as Dawn said at the start, that we can't answer today, then we'll ensure that we pinpoint those for different members of the senior leadership team if they're not on the call. But framing the year ahead is being framed by a business plan that looks at those 5 areas on the slide with sort of with vigor. Consequently, and they're still pretty expansive.
So it's stupid.
So the areas of the business plan, just a little bit more detailed. This is transformation and innovation. Again, next slide, Dawn. So this is the areas where this portion of the team are focusing on specifically. Again, a wee bit of a drill down from the first 5 objectives. They can see themselves contributing emphatically to 4 of those objectives. And I've highlighted some of these opportunities along the way. Primary care and the renegotiation of the GP contract, the role of the neighbourhood in this regard. Obesity pathway is because we believe we've attracted some investment from external funding where we again will be looking to see how in solving or addressing the challenges of obesity we can support that through with digital and data resources. Colleagues may be familiar with some of the work that's already being pioneered around virtual wards across the province, but colleagues in Belfast Trust lead in on that work. And we still have to stay cognizant of new and emerging technologies. As much as this might be a consolidation year in the financial sense of that word, it's still beholden of us as we watch what's going on with things like AI to keep an eye on the opportunities of and the challenges of that as we go forward. Next slide, Dawn. Again, another slice of our business called digital strategy implementation. Again, sort of 2 slides of import or note here. It's about the discipline around the portfolio. We know that there's a level of expressed need out there across the HSC and wider ALB partners that we can't fundamentally meet in terms of resourcing. Therefore, we need to be very, very conscientious about the way in which we spend every pound that does become available within the portfolio. We need to be rigorous around that. We need to understand that there will be rightly people who ask us to account for how we spend public money. And therefore, with colleagues in the HSC, we need to have a process that captures exactly the changes that investment has made. There's nothing about digital as an end in itself. We're always attentive to the fact that digital is fundamentally underpinning a new workflow, a new way of doing things, whether that's clinical, operational or administrative. So the portfolios office, again, will be focusing on the disciplines necessary to tell that story going forward in a rich and detailed way. Next slide, Dawn. And then the other part of this function looks at our underlying infrastructure and topics like cybersecurity. Again, very, very hard to know where you're going if you don't have a comprehensive picture and understanding of where you're starting from. So Mark and team have done an excellent job over the last while trying to capture that picture. We think it's pretty comprehensive, but again, there'll be more work done this year to understand have we got a complete understanding and picture of what's out there in the landscape, and then should we be actively and at pace in some respects retiring elements of these things on the basis that something like Encompass should be making the business requirement for some of the historic applications less and less important, less and less relevant. And if you can retire them and retire them safely and securely, then you can release the resources that may be associated with them in terms of licensing, or the resources where we're still training people to use tools and technologies that actually are now defunct, or we don't really need to be using them going forward. Next slide, Don. The Data Institute, again, I've highlighted the year of data. Next slide. I'm not going to go through this line by line, but again, it's just to be clear in terms of the scale and scope of the work that's going on across the Data Institute. We need to get it right at the first point. Good data depends on the structure of that data, the capturing that data in a timely way, the consistency of that data, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there'll be a comprehensive program of work across this year to reiterate the need for that, and to describe and demonstrate to people the impact that positively working in that manner, what that allows us fundamentally to do. And there's some specific work targeting medicines as well this year in that regard. Data is going to be fundamentally everywhere. The neighborhood, the role of the neighborhood and its delivery, the effectiveness of that policy will be underpinned by data, ensuring that we can support those neighborhoods to identify the cohort of patients who are most at risk of becoming in need of secondary care, and where we can intervene and prevent that, or attempt to prevent that, will be reliant on data, and so on and so forth. It's the lifeblood that runs through our system in that regard. And this year, as I say, there'll be more and more focus on that. That also includes, I know, some of the challenges that still exist in relation to maybe misalignment between what Encompass is able to deliver in terms of data and where policy expectations appear to be. And are they as up to date and as aligned as we would want them to be? Probably not. So we need to continue to do a program of work in that regard. Next slide. Again, this is sort of more detail from Lisa and colleagues about ostensibly. I think they've emboldened that, so I deliberately read out the phrase "one version of the truth." And we do this in partnership. There is a long-standing. The Data Institute has got a core, but fundamentally it also delivers most effectively with partnerships through colleagues in the universities, through colleagues in the PHA, and through colleagues in the HSC. Next slide. Again, this is just a little bit of more detail about the program of work as Lisa and team are drawing together under the year of data concept. So again, I mentioned lunch and learns earlier on and invited people to volunteer for that. We highlighted the focus on data in the context of NICON. There's a range of things highlighted there over the course of the year. We will, I think Dawn knows this, but we will move to produce, dedicated programmatic material, advertised material to support each of these things and turn under that year of data branding. Most of those will be digital communications, but we might even lean in on a leaflet or a standee every now and then. We'll have to wait and see. Okie doke. Again, I didn't want to in the course of this. There probably should be or could be another slide that says IMB Information Management Branch. There's an element of how all of this comes together that also relates to that bit of my portfolio that is the sort of Stormont Department of Health oriented bit. Eugene and colleagues joined us yesterday and went into some detail about how they, as NISRA statisticians based within the Department of Health, support policymakers and evaluation of policy. Again, we'll probably one for the diary going forward, Dawn, is to get Eugene and a couple of his colleagues along to actually deliver a digital dispatches, because there was a lot of richness in what Eugene was outlining yesterday. I wouldn't do it justice by trying to cover it over the next couple of minutes. But and similarly, there's an information management branch in the department where some of the framing policy work in relation to how we set about doing what we do is also that's where that's delivered from. So shout out to those colleagues, and again, going forward, include them in our program of digital dispatches. I think we're getting towards the end. So the last, but I mean, no less significant one really in this regard is digital workforce and professionalism. That's a long shopping list as we work down those slides. I think we have progressively getting to a place where colleagues don't think, oh, these are big IT programs and they're nothing to do with us. They're nothing to do with how we work. They're nothing to do with how our practice changes. They're nothing to do with, to steal something that I stole off a stand I saw in Belfast Trust, you know, how we work is changing. Colleagues will hear me say that time and time again. Every senior leadership forum I am in, I'm articulating the extent to which these tools that we are responsible for, you know, setting the requirements for, capturing the requirements for, commissioning, delivering, optimizing, are now fundamentally intrinsic to the way in which health and care is organized and delivered. But to be able to do that, we need to be the best set of digital data and technology professionals that we can be. It was a fun bit of yesterday afternoon was recognizing how many people had received formal certification for, you know, various CPD and other activities that, you know, they'd taken on in the course of their jobs of work. You know, people are getting qualified. People are putting themselves forward to be ITIL qualified, to be qualified in specific applications, and you know, and pushing on to master's level qualifications and the like. That's all incredibly important and all to be lauded. I still want to make sure that we pay attention this year to the overall question of who are we as a professional group? Are we being supported to, you know, talent pipelines and nurturing people to ensure going forward that old people like me can move over and new blood can come through, you know, safely, securely, and sensibly to lead this agenda forward for the public sector more broadly, but for health and social care more specifically. I was involved before I left England and for a number of years in sort of developing some work with a number of the professional bodies in relation to registration in terms of digital professionals. That's a topic that colleagues in England are sort of putting their arms around. Last slide, I think there's one more slide on. So one of the things that, again, I've started to pick up and talk to colleagues like Ben Dorn and BSO, but we'll also talk to other colleagues out in leadership roles in digital in the trusts is, you know, should we step behind some of this general push towards professionalism that is at least seeing some impetus and some investment from this perspective across the water in England. I wouldn't like us to be trailing behind any efforts to suggest we should be a professional registered workforce in the same way that our clinical colleagues have been since, you know, historically. But if you think about working with finance colleagues or HR colleagues, they're also subject to levels of you know, professionalism and registration wrapped around how they do what they do. We're not currently, so you kind of got to and be holding down a very responsible job around digital and data, perhaps. Not that, you know, people will be very capable, but it's not, you know, they possibly or probably haven't been certified to that effect. So one of the questions and opportunities we've got going forward is to think about how do we step forward into this increasing professionalism space as Northern Ireland, given that there has been some leadership work done by the other four nations in this regard. And to be fair, you know, Gary Loughran, who leads this within the team, has been part of that work with BCS and FedIP. I think that, as he says, as his voice begins to crackle, I think that's more than enough for me. That was half an hour, actually, not 20 minutes. But as you can see, you know, a rich program of work. It's not a done to program. It's not a done in isolation program. It's a done with program, and a program where the collaborations and the partnerships are intrinsic to us getting anything done. But I hope that gives you a flavour of what we think we should be being consumed with in the next period that runs up to the end of this mandate. I think it's also about setting down some markers and developing some thoughts for as and when investment may become available going forward. What are the things we'd want to put on the shopping list for an income administration? What are the promises we'd want to suggest that an incoming minister might be able to make with confidence on the basis of the role that digital and data could play in delivering his or her ambitions?
Thanks very much, Paul. We have had a question popped in to the chat there, but Eddie has kindly enough responded there and made connection with Neil, picked up on the virtual wards question so that we can connect him with NIAS. Thanks, Eddie, for that. We're going to open the floor up now to everyone that's online. Anyone that wants to raise their hand that has a question about digital programs in general or direction of digital. Any hands going up?
I've always thought that Teams missed a trick on the react button that you could press one where a bit of tumbleweed just rolled across the screen.
Anyone can come off mute if they like just to answer a question. Go ahead. Linda, you're first up there.
Paul, you've touched on how precarious our financial position is going forward, and you'll have seen in the press over the last couple of days that we've been told we can only spend 95% of our budget from last year going forward until the executive comes up with a solution for the budget going forward. What's the impact on that for us with a huge portfolio that has a lot of still to commence projects and some projects that are sort of a bit stuck? What's the impact likely to be for us going forward? Are we going to have to halt some programs of work? Are we going to have to elongate some of them?
Yeah, I think to a certain extent, Linda, you've partially answered your own question. I mean, it's a mixed bag, isn't it? I mean, the reality is we need to be more efficient with the resources that we've got. I mean, colleagues know I'm new to the province. The idea of living within your means has been something that the health service in England has had to get its head around for quite some time. I fear that we're catching up this year in some regards, and consequently looking at, so we've 8.5 billion quid. The question of when are we going to get more to make that 8.6, 8.79 or whatever is one question. The other question is, we've got 8.5 billion quid. How do we ostensibly and effectively spend that amount of money today, and are there other options and are other alternative ways of doing that? So one of the pushes under the efficiency side of this for us is to look at the articulated benefits or the ambitions and the business cases for the things that we've already got and go back and say, are they delivering those? Are they delivering more than we anticipated? I mean, that'd be fantastic. When they're delivering it, is it being counted? Where is it being counted? Is it being acknowledged? Those sorts of questions. Were they dependent on, and I made the point a little bit earlier to some extent, but were they dependent on being able to confidently retire other things that we're still paying for? And if that was the plan, have we got about that as diligently as we should? Or are we still effectively double running a number of things? So there's a lot of things that are a bit like managing your household budget that taking, I don't mean you managing one's household budget, that taking those situations and go, well, fundamentally, are we using everything as efficiently, as effectively as we can? And then another phrase of mine, shovel ready. I'm always wanting us to be expectant that, let's say in the course of the year in the capital programme, and this isn't guaranteed, but let's say in the course of the year in the capital programme there was some slippage. Well, let's understand if that opportunity arises that we've got a proposition to a project, a piece of work that's got a sufficient maturity and clarity that we can suggest that we can use that capital to that objective. But I wouldn't want us to be in a mind space that thinks that's going to happen time and time again, and therefore we shouldn't spend time, energy and effort on challenging how efficient we are with the money that we definitely already get and we have definitely already invested. Technical debt's going to be a problem. I do think fundamentally one of the tricks that's really quite hard to communicate is the extent to which it's not one and done. Once these systems are in, they necessarily need a level of maintenance and to a certain extent upgrade. we all know that we'd love to keep our laptops in best fettle, but I'm looking at this one and it's not that old, but it's looking a wee bit knackered and a few couple of chipped corners. These assets do deteriorate over time, and we need to ensure that we've got the money available to refresh and replenish them. So it's tricky. Effectively, I'd want us to be juggling a few things. Let's look at what we've already installed and paid for and check if we're getting the best out of those sorts of things. And let's check if we said we were going to retire some things on that premise. Let's get some shovel-ready projects together where we can see the benefits that they can deliver. Certainly, if those deliver in cash releasing terms, something that bit of management jargon, but washes its own face very quickly, then there may still be a route to support investment there. But I also know there'll be a lot of colleagues fundamentally disappointed because the total volume of what's built up in the portfolio was express need, and the amount of money that we've got to meet that is not in balance. We have less money than people will think we require. The other bit going forward is supporting and working with trusts about where those benefits are attracted locally, because they will be. It's only trusts who do the work. When those benefits are attracted locally, how are they reinvesting those in some of the assets and some of the underpinnings that we know need money and investment, rather than the working assumption that the centre's got the money every time. I can understand why that happened over the last 4 or 5 years, to get one programme of investment across Northern Ireland on some of these key building blocks, but that's not the way it's going to work in the future. It's not my job to make you all downbeat and miserable as you head into a long bank holiday weekend, just for clarity. I've checked the forecast. The sun's going to be out at least 2 of the 3 days of the weekend. So.
You're mute.
Sorry, just saying, does anyone else want to come in? Anyone, any more questions or want to raise any issues or suggest anything? Don't see anything going up. Don't see anyone coming off mute.
Can I just check, is there anything that anybody thinks barn door obviously we're missing? Because you have to cut your cloth, and I think the programme is still too big, candidly, for the resources that we've got. But I don't want to profoundly miss an opportunity that somebody's going, can't believe he didn't say that. I can't believe he hasn't noticed that would be of real benefit to us going forward. Can't believe that he hasn't picked up the fact that if we made that investment there, it would release that impact and make that impact and release that benefit here. Maybe that's one for answers on a virtual or digital postcard, Dawn. So yeah, but if colleagues think there is an area that we could or should be affording some attention to, there is loads more going on that's not captured there. There's quite a lot of work going on with Encompass colleagues and Mark Taylor and the elective recovery work, for example. We're waiting to be beneficiaries of a transformation fund project that will enable us to do something in electronic transfer prescriptions and various other areas as well. So there are other things that will be going on, but I just wanted to check that we weren't missing anything barn door obvious. I've got an AI one up here in the
Yes. Are there initiatives regarding the use of AI and how it will be used to enhance the workplace in the future and cost saving?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple. We've got the application of some AI currently in our systems around radiology and around bone AI and some other imaging. I think imaging is probably an area where the opportunities for AI, that conversation will continue to move apace. Colleagues may have a view about Copilot and about other resources that they may already have had a chance to play with or would think about wanting to use in administrative and roles. Again, I can see see a place for that going forward. One of our challenges in relation to that is that we negotiate with Microsoft every 3 years, and it's a very hefty bill just to do the basics every time. So a bit like my point earlier about are there any systems we're using that we should retire because we said we would. One of the other challenges we've got is that we often license for more people than actually work for us. And or we license potentially for a richness of functionality, which it might be legitimate to ask people about, do you really use all those bells and whistles? For us to afford something like Copilot at scale, there would have to be a significant additional investment, and or those sorts of maybe tough conversations with people about how can we absolutely sure that we're only affording licenses to those people who are actually within the HSC workforce or near neighbours, and that we're making sure that if, in terms of the grade of those licenses, that everybody's not driving around a Ferrari when a Mini would do them. So yeah, all of those conversations, Tom and the team is leading 5 or 6 strands of work to make sure that even as those economic questions get asked, we're also asking the ethical questions. We're also asking, that all of those elements move in parallel. I saw an article today, actually I'll dig below it, where one of the other epic using sites in the UK have got to the starting line with an intention to use ambient voice technology quite expansively, and then they've stuttered a bit with their governance. So again, we would be paying attention to those critical aspects as much as we thinking about the affordability or the benefit of investing in an AI related application or opportunity. But it ain't going away. It's going to be in our supply chain, even if even if we're going to be a while to fundamentally adopt it at scale within our own workflow. So yeah, we need to be absolutely attentive to it. Sue.
Yeah, I think some of the bigger programs are obviously going to be, you not see the impact immediately, you'll see them at the longer term. And I suppose my question is really about maybe some of our current more pressing issues like waiting lists. Where do you see any opportunities that we could be using digital or data more to support the waiting lists, either waiting well or those faster, any areas potential that we could actually be looking, because I don't think that's something that we have done quite a bit or any bits on previously.
So that whole elective pathway, I think, Sue, is interesting. The work with Mark Taylor, I think, is largely and not inappropriately focused at the productivity end of it. So are we in a situation currently where, if you like, you're at the door of the theatre or you're in the theatre, and we understand the extent to which that interaction is efficient as it possibly could be, as well as high quality and safe. So that's the sort of detail you start incorporating into Encompass, and that's the sort of functionality you start leveraging from Encompass. We have definitely had conversations in relation to MyCare about the possibility of its next version incorporating information to help and support patients to wait well. I think that would be very, very helpful. They're also in the sort of collaboration space. There it may well be, and I need to watch what I announce here ahead of ministers, because that would be career limiting. But there's certainly an acknowledgement there's a proportion of our population not in work as a consequence of things that are amenable to MSK or musculoskeletal interventions. Now, those musculoskeletal interventions, as he is a man who went last night to the physiotherapist and has got tape all over his right shoulder as we speak, are often not about desperately significant interventions. They're about the fact that she gave me exercises 2 weeks ago and I went back last night and told her I'd done none of them. So there has to be something out there for self-management and self-care that's trusted and authoritative. So the short answer is, I think we're probably by reintroducing Mark and colleagues to the richness and the functionality of Encompass, we're probably leveraging some of the efficiencies when you're at that stage of the care pathway or the workflow. Are we leveraging them in a number of, or a myriad of other ways, a couple of which you've highlighted? Well, not probably or possibly, definitely less so, and where we can wedge them into functionality or opportunity that we've already got at not a huge amount of cost, then we would want to do that. Where we see the need for more investment, we'd want to partner up and be creative about the funding streams for that. I think we've had quite a rigorous, and I understand why, but we have quite a rigorous, arguably straight line view of resource and finances and business cases. Again, one of the things that being in financial deep doo-doo should encourage one to do is to pass the plate a wee bit more and to see whether there's circumstances and situations where it's not one program. That's back to the skeleton key to some extent. The skeleton keys are there because we've identified that probably one program in and of itself may not be able to afford something. But if you can pass the plate and get half a dozen programs all seeing the common benefit of that, then you've got an opportunity. Colleagues might have picked up in the media this week the sort of launch of This Is Our Health. It started in the Abbey Centre this week. It's running over the next 6 or 8 weeks. It's a whole conversation with the population of Northern Ireland about what's being referred to as a something for something deal. I'm pretty certain that what will come out of that is a concern still about GP access and a concern about access to definitive information for self-management and self-care. I'd like to be part of that, of the solution to both of those conversations later on in the year.
Thank you.
Stephen's asking a question about automation. I don't know the short answer to that question. The scoping of what, I mean, currently, Stephen, the scope of what we're talking about in the Microsoft license is a like for like. To my point earlier about anything or everything else had been more expensive. But I don't know enough about. If you think Power Automate is one of those things where we should be understanding the benefits and the opportunities there, and there's a risk that we pass that opportunity up, then please articulate it. Darren Henderson is the SRO for the renegotiation of the enterprise agreement with Microsoft, so we can definitely pick that up. And then Rachel from NIAS. Hi, Rachel. Again, the short answer to that one is no in some regards, or the other answer is I had a conversation this week with the newly appointed chief executive of Optimemus, who are responsible for our primary care record, and I think one of the things we'd want to put on their roadmap is the desire to improve the relationship between the functionality within Optimemus's product and Epic. But I appreciate from an IAS perspective that's you're still on a different platform again, and there may or should be pragmatic conversations about your own ambitions and where NIAS's EPR ambitions are going and at what pace, and then also in the meanwhile, is there any way where we can ensure that you're in the loop at the appropriate points in the patient's pathway or journey? It's I have a bit of a bias on this one because my son's a paramedic for Yaz in Yorkshire, but I don't have a comprehensive answer to that one in relation to the ambulance service and the enterprise architecture. I will go back to Mark and we will have a look and understand and explore the extent to which that enterprise architecture work has properly picked up the requirements or the current state for the ambulance service, and then something about what your ideal future state would be.
That's all the questions in the chat, Paul. I suppose just one last shout out to anyone online that wants to raise their hand or pop something else into the chat.
Folks, I'm conscious these could be for some people, a sort of, I'm going to use intimidate. I don't think anybody ever accused me of being intimidating in my life, but they are very open forums. Please do reflect afterwards if there's anything that any questions that you wanted to ask, and then we would happily engage and respond on those. I don't know, there may well be colleagues on here working this weekend. I'm always conscious that, particularly when you're talking with colleagues who are working in delivery organisations, that assuming that 5 o'clock tonight is the end of their working week and that they won't be back into Tuesday morning is can be a bit brutal. But whatever you are doing this weekend, enjoy yourselves, do it safely, get a bit of an R&R in if that's possible. As I said, I don't know if there's any, I mean, it's a big sporting weekend, so a number of us might be living on our nerves for various reasons, but that's different. We've chosen that sort of that affliction. But thanks for your time and attention this lunchtime, and we will see you all soon. So thanks very much indeed. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you.